Hello there and welcome to this Motionbuilder 2013 Mocap cleanup tutorial. What we're going to be doing today is that we're going to be taking some motion capture data and cleaning it up and preparing it for use in the game engine. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, my name is Dan Lowe. I'm an animator for Ubisoft Montreal. I worked on Watch Dogs and on Far Cry 3 and a bunch of other games before that. I've been using Motionbuilder for about 7 years. And what I wanted to do with this tutorial was basically to cover the usual process that a professional animator or motion capture cleanup artist would go through in their day-to-day work. There's a lot of information already out there about how Motionbuilder works and what the buttons and features and all of that kind of stuff does. So I don't, but there's not a lot of information about process. So the first thing that I would do is, when I'm first starting with Motionbuilder, is to set up a good layout. Now normally, because I'm recording, I'm only with one monitor here, but normally I'd be spread across 2 monitors, like this. This is my normal layout. So I have one big window open here, and then I have all of my F-curves and filters and the navigator, resources, story editor, and all of this kind of stuff over here. And this gives you a big window, so it means that you can really see your animation well. And then I'd save that as a layout up here. Create custom layout. This is Dan Custom, which is the layout that I just showed. At the moment I'm on editing, which is the default, and I'm just going to switch here to recording, which is a little bit closer to a sort of one-screen version of my usual layout. Now the reason I would set up custom layouts like this is because in Motionbuilder it's very easy to accidentally do that, where you drag away part of your layout and then suddenly this is floating, and then, oh no, then I can't get this back because Motionbuilder's new UI is a little bit difficult to rearrange sometimes. So if ever that happens, you can just click Control, Shift and whatever number it is for your layout, and it'll automatically reset the layout back to where it is. So that's a kind of good tip for that. So let's get to the actual kind of mocap cleanup stuff itself. The first thing that I want to talk about is retargeting. So this mocap data has already been retargeted to this character, but this is the kind of first step in cleanup, and depending on where you get your mocap data from, it may just be C3D markers, which are these blue things, which is the raw mocap data, or it may have already been retargeted. Like, say for example you use an outsourcing studio like for your mocap, they may have already retargeted this information for you. I'm not really going to go over exactly how you do a step-by-step of retargeting, but I just want to point out that it's really important when you first get this data, even if it's already been retargeted, to validate the data. That is, you'll usually get a video that comes with this stuff, of what the actual mocap actor is doing on the stage. And it's usually from about 2 or 3 angles, front, side, and a 3/4 angle. And it's really important to open those videos, which unfortunately I've not got them for this particular shot. But it's important to open those videos and to check that, okay, well, on this frame he was doing that, or on this frame he was doing that correctly. With retargeting, there'll always be disparities. The whole point of retargeting is that, say for example, you might have an actor that is 6'5", like the actor on your mocap stage is 6'5", and you've got a game character who's only 6 foot. He's going to have different proportions, different arms and legs, and the whole different height of his character. So when he walks, it's going to be slightly different. When he reaches, it's going to be slightly different. And the idea of retargeting is how to kind of transfer that information from one character to another character with as little loss of detail as possible. And there's a bit of an art to it. It's kind of difficult. There are some people who just do this. This is their job, is to just retarget characters. But like I say, it's very important to just check against the video and make sure that the stuff that you got from the mocap studio is what you're expecting. You have to give them some leeway. Sometimes there's nothing that can be done about that. Like for example here, the way that this neck works, that's just the reality of the fact that your character here is an approximation of what a real human would do. We've only got one bone for the neck, where in reality the neck sort of curves up like this because there's multiple bones in there. So in those kind of cases, you just have to sort of live with it. But for sure, like if you're seeing a lot of problems with your mocap data, just get back in touch with whoever retargeted it. You know, say, is there anything that we can do about this? Another good point about retargeting is, if at all possible, get your characters to be roughly the same, but like build your actual character models to be roughly the same as your mocap actor, if that's an option for you. You can do some resizing here. Like one thing that often people don't realize is that you can resize your entire C3Ds just by selecting the root marker. I'm just going to undo that. So you can actually compensate in some kind of ways for that. Also, I've noticed in other tutorials, I've noticed some other animators, they'll just get the data, they won't validate it, and they'll immediately plot it to their control rig and start animating. That's a really bad idea generally, because if you do that, if there's ever a problem with the retargeting, if there's issues with the mocap, there will be multiple instances of that problem. So say, for example, that the character, I don't know, goes to reach for his nose or something like that, and he doesn't touch his nose. It's like every time that his hand goes towards there, it's not going to contact. If you fix it in the retargeting, it fixes every instance of that going through that. It fixes all of the problems where there was disparities throughout your entire mocap shoot. Whereas if you don't, if you just plot directly to the control rig, you're going to have to fix every little problem individually. The way that what I mean by fixing that here is that once this is kind of like you've got a general retargeting here, you can actually select the actor body. This is the actor body, by the way. This is the actor skeleton. If you go up to here, you can show and hide. You're probably normally used to seeing this, which is Motionbuilder's actor body. When you're making adjustments, I tend to find that it's actually better to use the skeleton. The body sometimes makes it difficult to see where you should actually be putting these things in, because they're volumes. You kind of try and match it up. It's volumes, but it's also a skeleton at the same time. So let me just open this up, and I think I've got a group here where I can turn off the character. Yeah, there we go. So you might originally think like, oh, okay, well, this doesn't look right. This doesn't look like a human. I need to, position. I need to move this back and position this more correctly so that these actually touch this. That's not really how this kind of stuff works. It's more of a skeleton. So usually what I find is best is to actually do a basic setup for this kind of stuff when I'm retargeting, and then I would turn the actor body off, use just the actor skeleton here, and actually have my character already retargeted. Where are we? Let's do an export skin, and then actually make adjustments by sort of slightly moving this, and you'd need to make an adjustment. Well, like I say, like so, and then check it all the way through here, because that adjustment that you just made just affected everything. And for example, there might be a thing here where you might say, okay, I want that a little bit higher, or whatever. So you have to adjust back and forth and try and make it work. Also check across takes, because, and like I say, any adjustments that you make here are global. They affect everything in your shoot. So you want to go back here. This is the walk that we've got, and you want to check that the adjustment that you just made didn't wreck the other takes in here. So like I say, I've done some work retargeting this already. I'm not going to go I'm not going to talk too much now about retargeting, but just make sure that you retarget as good as possible. If you're working with a really good mocap studio or really good retargeting people, it'll already be a really good retarget anyway, and you won't have to worry about this whole process. So the real work starts once we plot to the control rig. So I'm just going to character here, and I'm going to click plot character to control rig. I'm going to turn off constant key reduction, because this reduces the amount of keyframe data and tries to optimize the curves, but I don't want to lose any detail at all, so I'm just going to remove that. If I had multiple takes in here, like a big long list of different walks, different shots that we did on the mocap stage, you can click plot all takes here and it will plot everything. That's a good way of batch processing all of this kind of like stuff and getting it all onto your character at the same time. I'm just going to click plot, and it's now baked, so it's now I've got my control rig there. I'm just going to hide actor all, and you see it's still some C3D markers here. So what I'm doing is I just click Control and W. These are my C3D optical markers, which is what comes out of a Vicon system. These are basically the balls that are attached to your mocap actor. And what I'm going to do is, down here I've got groups selected. I'm just going to create a group. I'm going to call it C3D, and then I'm going to turn off visibility in there. If you've never used groups and sets before, they're really good for this kind of thing. Otherwise you have to go through and individually turn on and off the visibility on each object. So now we've got this for our character he's plotted on. Actually, I should have, just thinking about it, I should have done that plot all takes, because I have 2 takes. Okay, I'm going to go to my determined walk. I think I already plotted it before, but just to show you, I'm going back to the actor now and plotting control rig. I should have done that really, and it would have plotted both my takes, but I'm just going to plot this one take again now. Okay, so I've got my actor walk here. You'll see the hands are still messed up because we didn't capture finger data. I actually don't need this anymore. The whole point of the range of motion file is just a file to validate the mocap data went through fine. It's the mocap actor on the stage moving to different extremities, so that you can kind of test that when you're retargeting, test that everything went across fine, and make sure that your retarget's clean. So you've got all of the information from the mocap shoot. You've got it onto your character now, and you're ready to start animating. So the first thing that I would do with this walk cycle, the goal is to get a walk cycle that loops and that has got as much unique information in there as possible, and then to fix any extra issues that may have come across as part of the retarget, and to prep it so that it's ready for the game. So the first thing that I'm going to do with this is I'm going to put it into the story editor here. Alright. I'm going to insert a character animation track. I'm going to make it look at this character. I'm going to insert the current take, and then I'm pressing A to frame this up, because this is captured at a weird time on the mocap shoot. So I usually like to zero this. This is not essential at all. It's just good for seeing how long your take is. And I'll frame this up, and I'll also bake it just to. Sorry. I did that a bit fast actually. Just right click, frame start and end, and it will make my time slider match up, and then right click, plot whole scene to current take. I just do this as a good backup. I'm not even actually going to animate on this take, but it's a way of cleaning up the source data before you start working proper. I'm going to go to a new take, copy the data from the current take to the new take. No, I don't need to do that. I'm going to frame start and end again. And what we need to do here is first we need to straighten this up, put it in the scene properly. I'm not sure what that is. Okay, it doesn't seem to be affecting the rig, but we'll check that later. What I've done here is I've turned on ghosting, and you can see the character's path here through the scene. I think this guy is 180 in the wrong direction. He was probably just walking backwards through the mocap volume on the stage. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this guy all the way around, and then I'm going to double click on here and zero this. So this should be moving totally on a line, I think. Let's zero this. See, that's not lined up correctly. That's bizarre. Usually that works. Alright, well, it doesn't need to be perfect, so I'm just going to line this up. That should do. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go into a side view. And what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for two similar frames. But the thing that I need to clip off is that when he was starting here, he leans into this, and we don't want any of that lean. This is just as he's accelerating from an idle to walk. We don't want any of that lean in with the walk cycle. So we need to clip it off as soon as he straightens up, really. And we want to get as much of this mocap data in as possible where he's actually walking. And then this is the point at which he moved out of the capture volume, and so it no longer captured that. So you usually want to clip the last couple of frames off that, because what happens is that there's a space within on the mocap stage where the cameras have got good coverage of that space, and then as you hit the edge of that space, the character data starts breaking down, because it'll only pick up data that, for example, is on the back of the character. It won't pick up the hand as it goes out of that volume. So this kind of stuff you really want to clip off, because it's not really good data. It's been reconstructed, but it's not actually what the guy was doing usually. So what I'm going to do here is I think I'm just going to clip that there. I'm just looking for a pose that is going to be like where I'm going to loop this. So I'm going to clip that off. I'm going to delete everything that's after that. I just used the razor there in order to do that. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. And so here we're on right foot passing position. I'm going to scroll this back, and I actually want left foot passing position really here, because I need a bit of overlap, because I'm going to loop this. He's still leaning forward a little bit there, but I'm okay with that, because otherwise I'm going to have to scroll all the way through to kind of here, and I'm going to cut a lot of mocap data out. And really, you want this to be as long as possible. There are some game engines that will only accept kind of like two footsteps, like one left and one right, because they want to. The actual system wants to know that that when it's 50% of the way through an animation, it knows exactly what footstep it's on. But really, like, you want to have as much variety in this cycle as possible. So, depending on how your game engine works, if you have the option to kind of like have lots and lots of different footsteps, it's always better. It makes much more varied looking walk cycles and slightly less robotic looking walk cycles. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip it here on the opposite foot, and we'll delete all of that information. I'm going to click on this and zero it, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to frame start and end here. So here we've got left foot passing, and here we've got right foot passing. Okay, I'm just again going to go into this other view. Sorry, this is Control and E to get into that view, and it's Control and R to get into the side and go front. So I'm just going to check that this is kind of straight again, or roughly straight. It doesn't need to be perfect, but yeah, that's fine. So go back in R, and I'm now going to pick the frame that's going to be the start of my animation. So it's usually, passing position's usually a good one to start with walk cycles, because it tends to blend pretty well with stuff, with other motions. Contacts are a little bit extreme when it gets to actual game blending, so I'm going to go for that. I'm going to cut that there. You want something about halfway through. I'm going to drag this to the other side. I'm going to drag this back, and you see we've still got ghosting on, so we've now got information about where each of these clips start. This is where this clip starts, and I'm going to go into translate, here, I'm pressing T, and I want to make sure that I'm in global, and I'm going to translate this forward, and then I'm going to click this, and I'm going to translate it back to roughly around there. So what I'm going to do is that the start of this second clip is left foot passing, and you see here we've got almost right foot passing. I'm just going to scrub this back until it's left foot passing. It doesn't have to be perfect for now. Okay, and then I'm going to run this back to that frame. Just going to drag this forward a little bit. I'm going to zoom in, try and get this a little bit better. And what you're usually looking for at this point is you want the feet to match up, but you also want the pelvis to match up. The pelvis, when you're blending motions together, this is super important, because if you don't want any interruption in the motion, this is where the center of everything comes from, the center of all of your motion comes from, the center of mass. You want this to be consistent for a smooth motion, but obviously you also don't want foot sliding. So I tend to prioritize the pelvis first, because you can always fix feet. I mean, you could fix both, but I tend to prioritize the pelvis first, but you need about 50-50 between the two of these. So I'm going to go about there. You see, these aren't perfectly aligned on that frame. You see, again, you want to step through this about 50-50 as well. You want to make sure that that kind of lines up as well as possible. It's probably more important than this frame here. And if you really wanted to, you could turn off snap here, and you could just adjust this to a very fine kind of detail. Adjust this back or forward maybe. But you just need to scrub through and make sure it's like that all the way through. You might want to get to the end here, and then I'm going to put this on scale. You could scale that forward a little bit, so that all the way through this it's pretty consistent. And then we want to make sure that all of this stuff stays on a we don't want to be on sub keys, so I'm just dragging all of this so that it's on whole keys. I'm going to zoom in here with both of those selected, and this is closer to 91, so I'm just going to scale everything down to 91. So okay, as we're going in, that's a pretty good match. Should also make sure that it's matched up in the front, which it should be already, because we made sure that our path through the scene was straightened. Don't worry about the fact that this is now deviated off center. That'll happen. Just because as he was going on this big walk, he probably drifted off a little bit to the side and then went back, and because we split it in half and rearranged the order of these things, then once you split it, it recompensates for those trajectories. So yeah, back in the front. Well, there's a bit of sliding, but that's fine. So what I want to do here is that now I'm kind of happy with that. I'll test. We need to select both of these and do frame start and end to make sure that this is the right length. And we'll play. Just gonna click Control and A to switch myself onto models only. You see toggle in here. And I don't know what the frame rate's like on the capture, but that's not too bad. He's looping all right. I'm not going to be cleaning this motion up, you know, to super polished kind of standards, because I've only got so much time on this tutorial. But okay, so I'm fairly happy with that. So I'm going to right click on this, and I'm going to go plot whole scene to current take. Again, I'm going to make sure constant key reduction is off, and we definitely want to make sure plot all takes is off on this. And plot, and then You could either leave this in here if you want to, but what can tend to happen is that if you forget these are in here, then your files will get pretty big. So I'm just going to get rid of this now because I'm happy with what I've got. Sometimes actually I leave it in here to just make sure that, because you can mute this or you can turn the entire story editor off here. In which case the control rig will take over. Sometimes I will leave it in here. In fact, yeah, I'll leave it in here for now because it's a good reference for the areas that you need to fix. All of this stuff should be pretty clean because it's just straight up mocap. This is the area where all of our blending's kind of like happening. So there's likely going to be problems in this kind of area, sliding feet usually, and maybe some trajectory offsets with the pelvis. So I got my data on my character. I'm ready to start animating. First thing that I would want to do is just check that the pelvis is clean going through here. So I'm actually just going to go to the entry point here for this, and you could select this key and delete the entire key. If I'm on full body at the moment. And that would wipe out all of the information and just let it interpolate between those. It's usually at this point and this point that there are blending issues. So yeah, I'm just going to click on that and delete the whole key. I'm going to do the same for here. Just a second, I'm going to get a drink of water. Okay. So you'll probably not notice it at the moment, but especially with the frame rate of the capture. But somebody's playing Batman. Turn you off. At the moment, so okay. So we'll clean up that. That'll just mean that again, it's probably difficult to tell with this frame rate, but that'll clean up the trajectory of that. The next thing that you want to clean up is the feet, and make sure that there's no sliding. And the way that I would do this is I'm going to select this. I'm going to make sure that I'm on full body. I'm going to click on animation, and plot selected, all properties, and plot. And what I'm doing there is the Motionbuilder runs on two rigs. You have an FK rig and an IK rig at the same time. And when you're doing IK-FK switching, when you're switching the weight of the IK blend between stuff, you just want to make sure that things are consistent between those two things. You want to make sure that what you're seeing in the scene, that when you turn off the weights or switch the weights between these effectors, that it's going to be consistent. So I'm about to switch these so that this is the controlling point and that this is turned off. And so it's just good, at least, well, in my workflow, it's good a habit to get into to make sure that those are consistent between the two rigs. So I'm now going to go in here. I'm going to turn off the weight for these, and I'm going to turn on I'm just control clicking here so that I've got both of those. Turn on the weight for those. This is the point that you really want to edit for locking feet. You need to be careful that when you're doing this editing, that the heel of the foot doesn't lift up too much, because this can happen where it's lifting off. But this is the point that is really locking when you're doing a footstep. So I'm going to go to my F curves here, and it's translation that we care about, not rotation at the moment. And you'll see here in my Z axis movement, some of these are flattened points, but if I just compare this against my story editor as to where we were having issues, or where we will expect issues, this foot will probably have a little bit of sliding on it here. Yeah, you see there's some sliding stuff there. It's going through the ground, although I don't mind too much, it's not too bad. So specifically at this point, I'm going to go into my F-curves, and like I say, I'm going to translation, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the point at which it first touched down. It's like there. I'm going to lock that on. I'm going to copy this, and at this kind of point where it's lifting off, I'm going to paste, and then I'm going to delete everything in between. And now we have a nice locked foot. Now because I pasted this, you see there'll be glitches in here, so I'm going to go in and just iron those out. That's pretty close already. You see this is like, well, you see this problem where you see that'll actually change a lot. What you want to do here is that I'm selecting all of this stuff here, is that I want to compensate for that difference for this snap over the course of this entire footstep. I don't just want to fix this one frame, because then it's only just going to, if I just did like this, it's just going to replicate that kind of problem along the line. The more that you can spread fixes like that over multiple frames, the better. So, I mean, you do need to be wary about the changes that you are actually making, but I'm just going to slide this up, and then that should get rid of that. It doesn't matter if it slides back a little bit as he lifts off, it's just the plant that you care about. Again, I just noticed that we've got some foot sliding here. I'll show you another way of doing foot sliding actually. So I have my thing selected here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the point again when he hits down. That'll do. And I'm going to select that and then scroll forward to the one where I want it to lift off. Right there. And I'm going to, with this selected, I'm going to right click on here, and I'm going to say copy previous key on selected IK objects, I think is what it is, and I'm going to do just translation. So what this does is it takes that key and it makes this flat, like so, for the entire selection that I did there. Now, I know other animators that do this. Personally, I prefer to actually do it manually. You get a little bit more control, and you still need to fix this thing. And sometimes when people do this, they feel like that just did the whole process for me. You still need to edit your curves so that you've got good ins and outs at the end. Oopsie, problems here. So I'm just adjusting these curves to make sure these footsteps are smooth. And when you first start, you probably want to check this as much as possible. You get used to over time how to adjust these curves without breaking your animation. So what I'm trying to do here, this is kind of a tough situation really, because it's just I really only want to move some of these down, but what's going to happen is when I move this, it's going to actually make these longer. So I'm going to move this close like that, and then I'm going to drop those down to there. So we're just trying to make these curves line up with these flats, so that as it goes into and out of this flat footstep, there's no jarring. I mean, again, all of these could probably use a little bit of work, but I think we've mostly covered the areas. I'm just trying to show you examples of what to do. Yeah, you see I definitely noticed some sliding. I don't know, they're sliding all the way through this. Go in. Yeah, definitely want to fix that. Copy. And when you're doing this, I've generally found that it's best to copy the first keyframe. So if you've got a flat here, it's generally better to copy that one, because you have a choice really. You could kind of like say, okay, well, I'll copy something from here where the foot is lifting off, and I'll copy that back to here. Or you can copy here where it first contacts and copy it forward. I generally always copy here, because when this contact comes down, that tends to be more important to maintain the original motion than this where it's lifting up. The contact, pose usually defines the actual feel of the walk cycle, so it's good to keep that as clean as possible. So I'm going to copy this, and yeah, it's sliding around a bit, so lifting up and paste. Go back and delete those. Select all of these, put them on flats. Go in, adjust these. I'm doing the same kind of stuff over and over again, so I'll make this the last one that I clean up, because I'm not really showing you anything new. Delete, delete. Okay, so I'd go through and I would clean up that kind of stuff there. Now, the thing that is probably sticking out to everybody here is that these fingers are flat. On the mocap stage, let me bring that back to markers to just sort of show you. Let's talk a little bit about how mocap works. Where are my C3Ds? Where are you, C3Ds? Bizarre. Okay, I'm just going to pause and then find out where these things are. Okay, I found it. Okay, the issue is that because I copied to a new tape, there's actually no motion capture on here anymore. It's still back on there. So my actor's collapsed here because there's no mocap data here. So yeah, let's just go back to the determined walk, and we'll talk a little bit about how this works. Usually the issue that you have with motion capture is that you have all of these markers all over the character, and when you're attaching these balls to the actor, you can put on as many as you want, and the more that you do, the more information that you have about the shape and the motion of the actor as he was moving around. The problem is that often, say for example, your hand will pass here in front of your body, and it might obscure one of these motion capture markers. There might not be enough cameras on the mocap stage looking at these markers in order to triangulate that position, because the arm was in the way of the marker at that particular point. So what you then have to do is that you have to look at the other markers that are here and say, well, you know, I know that this marker is always probably going to move relative to the sternum, so I'll say, well, using the position that this was in and maybe these two other markers, try and reconstruct where this marker was on that frame when it went missing. And there are automated processes to try and do this, but what you get is if you have too many of these put together, when the automated process tries to fix this, sometimes it gets confused about them if they're moving very fast. So if, for example, in one frame it was here, and then no, it's still powered by the control rig, so I'm just going to switch this back to being powered by the actor. So in one frame it was here, and then okay, I know what's happened. Alright, never mind, I'll just talk about it. Anyway, say in one frame that say that the hand was really moving fast, like this marker might get confused with this marker if the hand then moves over to here. So you generally don't want too many markers too close together, and because of that it's usually very difficult to mocap hands. So there are some mocap setups, and this is something that we do at Ubisoft, where you put an extra marker on the end of the finger and you approximate the entire hand using one marker. That actually works surprisingly well if you've got a good tool for it, but in this particular case, with this particular animation, that is not the case. So what you would do is, I'll just get ourselves back to where we were, with that character walking through the scene, and we'll hide all of that stuff. So what you do is that you start animating. So in this particular case, I'm going to go back and select these hands here. I'm going to frame up on it with F, and you might actually have a pose bank somewhere, like poses here. Oh, okay, we've already got some hand poses in here, so or some different poses. Okay, I'll say I could take a walk pose and I could shift select all of these, and I want to click on body parts so that it only pastes on the hand, it doesn't overwrite the entire body, and I could put a walk hand pose on there, you know, or I could just start keyframing where I say, okay, I want you to move in a little bit, I want these to move in a little bit. Apologies if these mouse clicks are a bit loud. I'm also not really talking much about what I'm doing. I'm just shifting between translate and rotate by pressing T and R. I'm also shifting between local and global at points by pressing F5 and F6, but most of the stuff that you would do here would be local. And I'm just adjusting to try and get a kind of natural hand pose. A lot of beginners tend to make hand poses quite flat, but if you actually hold your hand out in front of you and in a natural pose, it tends to curl up a little bit. Maybe spread these out. Again, at none of these stages am I going to town on making it super clean, because it's a quick tutorial. So don't judge me. I'm just going to make some little adjustments to here. God, this ain't great. Move that out a bit. Move that up a bit. Maybe curl these a little bit more. I'll make tweaks after I see what happens. Okay, so I've made a bunch of tweaks. I'm going to go to this anim layer that's already here. And I tend, because I've been skipping around a lot of this, I could just stay in body parts here and just key the stuff that I've done. But I want to be keying the IK and the FK and all of that kind of stuff, so that you know, what we see is what we get. So I'm just switching to full body here, and I'm going to press K to key, and that'll key that all the way through, because I've just done this on a layer. So that thumb's probably a bit far forward, but whatever, might go in here. Sometimes just manipulating this gives a bit of a weird pose on this part of the body, of the hand, sorry. So I'm just going to go in, I'm going to flatten that out. I'm going to move this forward. If you ever find that you're animating and there's part of your rig that really works kind of badly, or that is not what that you're finding it very difficult to kind of get good poses with what you're doing, it's sometimes worth talking to the character artists. I mean, if you're halfway through production, they're not going to be able to make any changes because they're going to need to keep the rig consistent. But if it's really early on, it's good to have a good dialogue with your riggers and to say, like, oh, you know, this could be, you know, better. Don't be judgmental. I mean, like, those guys know their stuff better than you do. But say, you know, I'm trying to animate this and I'm trying to get really good poses. It would be great if we could work on making this better, and I'll send you some test data. Is there anything that you think you can do with that? And generally, people are receptive to that kind of thing. Okay, so now that I've cleaned this up on one hand, I am going to make a pose. I should really be naming these, but because this is just quick, I'm going to click mirror, and I'm going to select the other hand. I'm going to shift. You can shift click to select all of these at once, and I'm going to. Whoop, I don't want to paste all of that. I just want to paste the fingers, so I'm going to do that. And paste, and again I'm going to key, key there. And I'm going to turn mirroring off so that I get rid of my plane here. And, well, that's better than it was, but it's, you know, not great. You'd really want to do some work on this. Make sure that the hands are, you want it with the hands, I mean, it's different for each kind of pose, but you generally want to get used to how hands kind of line up with the forearm, so that you don't break, you know, don't have the look like it's broken the wrist, you know, something like that, like somebody's not maybe naturally going to hold their hand like that or whatever. You just have to get used to this stuff, observe people, and learn good body mechanics, I suppose. And again, you can always go back and refer back to your to the mocap videos. That's why they're there. It's not just for retargeting. So anyway, I'm just tweaking these. I'm just doing very quick tweaks here. One thing to notice that I'm doing is that that I'm about to do here is that I'm going to keyframe here. Well, let's try and do a full body one. I only keyframe here just because that was the point at which I happened to make that one adjustment, but I think that this is a global change. So I'm going to get rid of this original keyframe on my layer, so that this change that I just made here is going to affect everything across the board. I mean, I could drag this back here now. I hope people understand what I'm actually doing here. I'm making adjustments on this layer that are affecting the entire animation. That's the whole point of layering, really. And you know, we have a walk cycle here, really. So there are plenty of other things that, you know, I might do this. Like looks a little bit hunchbacked there. So, you know, you would maybe do stuff where I'm going to go up here. If you click on this stuff, you can either toggle on the pinning on or off here, or you can press W and E to do the pinning. It's kind of useful. I actually want to return the control of this rig back to default. So, because at the moment the feet are being powered by this, are being pulled around by this IK effector. So what I'm going to do is, while full body is selected, again, well, first of all I'm going to bake down my changes on this animation layer. So by just clicking on that, control clicking down there, and then clicking this, and merging the layers. But yeah, I'm going to select this, or you could select any point on the body because it's in full body. I'm going to do animation, plot selected, plot. And again, this is just making sure that any changes that I make on the IK rig are also consistent across the body on the FK rig, and what you see is what you get. I do this before almost every time that I change weights, unless I want some sort of specific weight change, you know, where at one point it's interpolating with IK and at another point it's interpolating with FK. So turn that on, turn these off. Whoa. There we go, go back up. Okay, so I've got my character there. Yeah, let's maybe see about this kind of like slight hunching on the back. Oh, slight hunching on the back. It's probably to do with how that spine is set up. Might be to do with the actual head and neck, or it could be to do with the shoulders there. But I probably want to push that back like this, but I don't want this to counter animate. I don't want to have to counter animate it, sorry. So I am going to select all three of those, and I'm going to lock. I'm actually going to lock those as well, and then I'm going to select this and move, and you see now I can adjust my spine a little bit without moving all of this other stuff. Again, I'm going to add a new layer so that I can make my adjustment across the whole animation. I'm going to key that there, and well, it's not as hunched for sure. If we were really tweaking, that we would go through and, you know, do things, you know, all the way across the timeline instead of making these global changes. But this is just trying to do trying to fix the big things that I'm noticing. One of the awesome things with Motionbuilder from 2012 onwards is in the new layers there's a layer weight. This wasn't in older versions of Motionbuilder, so I can actually just adjust that layer as I want. So say that if I think I've gone too far, you can kind of see this here. You see, I like the kind of silhouette at the top here a little bit more like this, but I kind of maybe like it down here a little bit more like that. Maybe not. Probably instead. You see it, and this is kind of like now making him like look like he's got a bump here, so I probably need to instead go in and maybe change the pelvis. I'm going to lock these down here so that when I change the pelvis it's not going to roll these. Sometimes you might also want to set these to rotation so that you don't affect the legs at all. I'm just going to move this up, and again I'm going to key, and because my key is away from here and I want this to be a global change, I'm going to delete that. But you get the idea that this is the kind of thing that I'm doing when I'm cleaning up a motion, is that once I've made this cycle and dealt with that, once I've fixed the hands at least a little bit, and normally I would put a little bit more variety on the fingers, I would actually animate them moving as I'm going through the course of the animation, instead of just the static pose that we pasted. But you're just now looking at the animation and saying, are there things that I could change, that, you know, things that the retarget didn't get quite right, things that, you know, don't look correct. Is his gait wrong in his walk? You know, whatever else. But again, as this is a quick tutorial and we are coming up on an hour, I'm going to speed this up a little bit. So, bake down that change that we just made to the spine, and the next thing that you want to do is this thing here, and this may look totally different in whatever game engine that you're using, or your game engine may not even have this. This is the root, or the displacement. It's basically a marker to say kind of like where is the position of my character, and this is going to be used by the game engine to align different clips of animation, so that when you move from a walk to a stand, it needs to have a center point around which to blend those animations. And it also needs to know, you know, this is how, in some animation systems, like if you have a physics-driven animation system, it will attach this to whatever physics object is driving your character around the world. So basically, this is just some positional information that the game engine will use to understand where the center of your character is, and to keep things consistent when it moves from one motion to another motion. So what I want to do with this is I want to constrain it so that it's following the pelvis, and then I'll make some adjustments afterwards. So I'm going to go into my asset browser here, and I'm going to add a new constraint. I'm going to add a parent-child constraint. Well, actually, no, I'll just add a position constraint, because we don't really care about rotation for this particular animation. He's just walking through the scene, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag that into the scene. And then here it's going to create a new constraint. You can just ignore all of these constraints. This is how a setup to make the character deform more like the in-game character, to give us better feedback when we're animating. So this is my position constraint here. I am going to select this, and I'm going to Alt drag and say make this my constrained object. I'm going to select this, and I am going to Alt drag, and I'm going to say make this the object that is driving this object. I am going to 0 that, and normally when you 0, it would actually like make these snap right together, but this particular object has got something to snap it to, some settings to make sure that it's snapped to the ground constantly. You find those in once the object is selected, you find it in properties, and where are we? Degrees of freedom. These are global restrictions on how this object can kind of move, and in translation you'll see that it has restrictions in Y. Don't move more or less than 0 in Y. If I turned this off, it would snap up there. So this is a good thing, because you generally don't want this to lift off the ground unless perhaps you're doing an animation where a guy's jumping over something. or something like that. So this is just constrained here. There's no key, and it will follow the character now. And there are no keys on this object to specifically say that it's doing this, keyframes to do that. So it's just constrained. And I'm going to go, now that it's constrained, whatever this is doing in the scene, when I plot, it will actually paste keyframes on top of this. So again, plot selected, plot. Okay, and now I can turn my constraint back on. Just the thing about constraints, a lot of animators, I'm surprised actually at how many animators don't like using constraints, or they're sort of intimidated by constraints, because a lot of animators are real incredible artists, but they tend to shy away from some of the more technical kind of stuff. Not all animators are, but they tend to shy away from some of the more technical solutions, and they kind of brute force stuff by doing keyframing, because it's very similar to traditional animation. And really, some of the more technical aspects of these programs can really help you solve problems very, very, very fast. Things that you shouldn't really have to brute force with keyframing. And constraints is one of them. For example, I could have keyframed this to follow this guy perfectly, but that's a really painstaking process. Constraints in Motionbuilder is super easy, unless you get into something like relation constraints, which are once you start being able to do math and logic and things like that. But simple stuff like position and translation stuff is definitely worth learning about. There's a bunch of information in the help about it. But anyway, now this, I've turned off my my constraint, so it's no longer powering this. It's under its own steam on keyframes, which we can see here. Now that it's got this, we don't want this guy to we don't want this to be back and forth. Once you get into the game engine, I mean, this is a player character, so he's going to move based on either physics or being animation powered. But especially for AI that has to move along specific paths, you want to guarantee that he's actually moving in straight lines. The character itself can stray away very subtly from this, not too far, but you generally want this itself to be on straight lines, because this is what it's going to use to kind of snap a character to a path, for example. So in this particular case, I am, now that it's done by keyframes, it's no longer following the pelvis. I'm going to select all of the x-axis stuff, and I'm going to flatten it. This is a really useful bit of the curve editor if you've never used this. I just click this and it'll zero all of that stuff out, so it's now moving exactly on 0. You can actually set different values in here just by typing on that. Very useful for flattening stuff. So this is now flattened on 0. I'm also going to move the character across. I'm just selecting translation. I need to now put him on global so that it doesn't slide him down into the floor. And I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to go into the front. And I've still got locking on all of this stuff. I'm just going to click this to ignore all of the pinning that we've done. And I'm going to slide this guy across so that he's roughly matching that. I'm going to key it. I also want to make sure that I didn't slide it too far one way or the other on this. You see that's a little bit over to the left, to my left. So I'm just going to slide this back, and you see now he's just looking at these two lines. You want to make sure that his pelvis is roughly kind of moving between those two lines. You see, it's fine for him to move off center a little bit. You kind of want that. You don't want it to be directly on this. Otherwise it's just going to look too robotic. And in the same way, you want to keep all of this. The reason that I constrained this and then baked is because this guy's not moving at a 100% consistent rate, and you want to keep a little bit of that forward and backward information. Like if I show you what I'm talking about, if I go to translation on this, on the base layer, if we zoom in a little bit, I don't know if you can see this, but this is not completely flat. There's very slight kind of bumps in here, and that's good. That's just because as you rise and fall, like there's a very subtle acceleration and deceleration that's going on, and you want to keep that in there. You know, if you remove too much information from this, like it's going to make your animation look robotic. In fact, that's a good kind of point about mocap in general. A kind of newbie mistake with mocap, and something that I definitely did for the first couple of years when I was doing mocap cleanup, is to go in here and to look at all of these keyframes and think that you have to flatten them out totally in order to get kind of clean motion. You know, looking at this kind of thing, like you could say, oh, that's not a flat thing, I need to flatten this so that it is really, really flat. In reality, if you mess with this stuff too much, you're going to get something that looks robotic and computery and swimmy. Mocap is a weird kind of discipline in that sort of it is as close to human motion when it first starts, and then the more that you work on it, kind of the worse that it gets, really. I mean, great animators can do things to make it more visually appealing by say pushing to more comic book poses, but in terms of pure body mechanics and physics, it is as good as it's going to get when it first starts if you've got a good retarget, and it's really more about preserving that and making any changes that you need to make if you want to caricature certain poses without losing that information. You know, we have to do certain things like loop this animation or make it hit certain poses in order for it to work in the game engine. But like I say, you want to do as few moves as possible in order to kind of clean this up. So anyway, so we have our character, and he's moving through the scene, and yeah, this would be good enough to do a first pass export into your game engine. You'd probably want to polish this up a little bit more. You'd definitely want to do some more work on the fingers. You'd probably want to clean up all of those footsteps that we had. He's looking a little bit bow-legged in some of these things here. This here, again, we want to make sure that that's not too hunchbacked. You know, you might want to work on some of these poses to make sure that it's exactly as you want it. But this is fine. You can you definitely want to get a fast version into the game engine as quickly as possible, so that your designers can start designing missions or start building features based on this kind of stuff. So yeah, so that's basically what I would do to clean up a normal walk cycle. Hopefully I'll be doing some more kind of tutorials like this. I hope that you've picked up some interesting kind of tips from it. And yeah, thank you for your time.